Welcome to the continued session of the annual town meeting. I hereby declare that the town meeting, which on Monday night ended at 11 p.m. after the article under consideration was completed, and adjourned until tonight at 7 o'clock at this site. So I hereby declare the annual town meeting to be back in session. Our first order of business, I would ask you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Since we just met Monday, I'm going to dispense with going over the long list of rules that I usually do because I'm tired of hearing them and you're probably much more tired of hearing them. Before we start, I am going to recognize Mr. Kimball for a moment, but before to make an announcement. But before I do that, I just want to say very briefly, I'm going to pledge to you tonight to try to do a better job as your moderator of keeping this meeting on track, keeping it civil, and keeping it moving and respectful. I'm going to pledge to do better than I did Monday night. I'm going to ask all the town officials sitting up here to do the same, to do a better job than we did on Monday night at keeping the meeting moving, keeping it respectful, and keeping it playing. And I'm going to ask all of you out in the audience to do a better job than you did Monday night in respecting everyone and making sure that we keep the meeting moving. I think I ask you to join me in our goal in making this a better meeting and our ultimate goal in making this a better town through the actions of this meeting. So I ask you all to join me tonight. And before we get into the warrant, Mr. Kimball, I wanted to make an announcement about something of local happening. And let me just, before that, let me just have the town clerk read the amended motion so we know we're legal here.
Norton, Massachusetts, 16th of May, 2018. By virtue of this warrant of the town of Norton, I have this day, May 16, 2018, notified the inhabitants of said town of the adjourned session of the annual town meeting called for Wednesday, May 16, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the Norton High School Auditorium, 66 West Main Street, Norton, Massachusetts. Then and there to take action on the following articles. Articles 11 through 26, as originally set forth in the warrant of the annual town meeting called for Monday, May 14th at 7 p.m. by posting true and attested copies thereof at the following locations: Norton Town website, Chartley Post Office, Norton Municipal Center, Norton Public Library, and 3 other public places with the limits of said town. Attest, Michael Mayer, Constable of Norton, May 16, 2018.
Thank you. The moderator now recognizes Selectman Kimball for the purpose of making an announcement.
Hopefully the microphone will work tonight, right? First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming back for a second night of this. This is a very important meeting, and to add to what Bill stated, we are all neighbors. We all live in this great town together, and we have a lot of respect for each other. We have to keep it that way and make sure that we're all civilized and can meet each other on the street afterwards and understand that we all have our opinions and our goals. We get that. So I appreciate everyone taking the time again to come out for a second night. I'm not on Facebook. It's probably a good thing I'm not. If people are on Facebook sometimes get themselves in trouble. But there was a comment made about the Tricentennial Park and the playground, which, by the way, were done in different years for those of you who have been around for a while. Tricentennial obviously was 2011. The playground was built by volunteers many years ago. And we've been fortunate enough to have people that were able to take care of it for many years. And like all of us volunteers, there's a lot of us in this room. We don't all have time to do everything all the time as much as we'd like to do. But I want to recognize someone for stepping up to the plate today, because I understand that this morning there was a lot of issues on Facebook about the condition of our playground in our Tricentennial Park. So I'd like to read to you that Mr. Stephen Fuller, who's the owner of SMM Landscaping, saw on social media post today that the Tricentennial Park and playground had a real need for some professional attention, such as spring trimming and cleanup. Trash barrel was overflowing. Many of the moms were complaining about the lack of maintenance as well as the trees, etc., being overgrown because the issue was the use of the playground in the Raven Park. Steve stepped right up and dispatched a crew from his company at his own expense and himself to totally transform the park. So we'd like to give kudos to Mr. Stephen Fuller and his team.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to work. Begin with Article 11. Article 11. Article 11 is declared lost for lack of a motion by the moderator. Article 12.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chair.
I move, as written in the warrant, that the town appropriate the total sum of $995,158 for the purchase or lease for periods of time up to or in excess of 3 years, and equip the following new and/or replacement capital items and/or for capital projects for various town departments, and for the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, as set forth in the Finance Committee's recommendation and in the chart entitled Article 12, Proposed FY19 Capital Budget, and to be said appropriation to transfer the amount of $721,883 from the capital improvements account, $220,000 from the ambulance fund, and $53,275 from the water enterprise retained earnings account.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a request to transfer from accounts for the purposes of capital improvements. The capital improvements are, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, everything is, the amounts are as listed and for the purposes listed in your warrant. Ladies and gentlemen, this article requires a transfer out of the capital improvements fund, which means that the article therefore requires a 2/3 vote for passage. Are there any questions, discussion on Article 12? Mr. Chairman.
I just want to, I overlooked one comment. It is in the third sentence. It says up to or in excess of 3 years with an option to purchase. So I want to add that in.
Right, what was it, with an option to?
Purchase.
With an option to
To
purchase.
purchase.
Everybody understand that? That adds into the thing that it's leased with an option to purchase? Okay, any questions, any discussion, any comments? Seeing none. All those in favor of Article 12, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Article 12 passes by unanimous vote, as declared by the moderator. Article 13.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move, as written in the warrant, that the town vote to transfer the sum of $25,000 from free cash for tree services, including but not limited to the removal of hazardous trees, stump removal, and performance of additional preventive and emergency services, townwide, including crane rentals and other incidental and related expenses. Mr. Moderator, this is an article that pertains to leasing crane equipment for trimming and cutting trees close to power lines and utility lines. The town is taking a proactive stand since the storms that the last couple of years, Sandy and so forth. So this is coming from the reserve fund known as free cash, this $25,000.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion on Article 13? Seeing none. All those in favor of Article 13, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Article 13 passes by unanimous vote, as declared by the moderator. Article 14.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move, as written in the warrant, that the town vote to raise and appropriate the amount of $10,000 for legal services and/or technical assistance relative to Chapter 40B, comprehensive permit projects. In short, this is an increased legal account regarding Chapter 40B litigations. Currently, the account balance is just at $6,000, and the action tonight would add $10,000 to the additional $6,000.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or discussion on Article 14? Seeing no hands, all those in favor of Article 14, please indicate by raising your hands. All those opposed, Article 14 passes by unanimous vote, as declared by the moderator. Article 15,
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move that the town vote pursuant to the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E, 1/2, as most recently amended to amend the general bylaw entitled Departmental Revolving Funds, approved under Article 16 of the May 8th, 2017 Annual Town Meeting, by inserting two new revolving funds entitled Stormwater Bylaw Revolving Fund and 79 North Worcester Street, also known as Camp Edith Reed property. Revolving fund at the end of the chart set forth in Section 1 of said bylaw, and to establish fiscal year spending limits for such funds, all as imprinted in Article 15 of the May 14, 2000 Annual Town Meeting warrant.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that article then is as appears in the warrant, right? The bylaw is,
Yes.
okay, very good. Did you want to say something, Mr. Chairman?
It's just adding both those in the revolving fund, the amounts of $100,000 and for the storm water bylaw and $60,000 for camping.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or discussion on Article 15? Yes, sir.
Hello, Greg Vincent, 23 Reservoir Street. By revolving funds, are these monies to be spent on these properties, or is this monies that are set aside in case they're needed for these properties? Specifically, you get 237 answer to that and Wendell Jackson property.
Mr. Town Manager.
These are the maximums that can be spent out of these funds. Like the Wendell Jackson property that you're referring to, we have rental agreements on that property. That money stays in the revolving fund, and the maximum that can be spent out of that fund is what's listed on this paper.
Is 237 the Norton Recreational Center, the canoe rental?
Correct.
That's the space we were supposed to have a boat landing?
As the property is.
And they just put a new roof on the building?
Correct.
And there are no updates as far as when we'll ever get our boat landing?
Not right at this time. No.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or discussion on Article 15? Seeing no hands, all those in favor of Article 15, please raise your hand. All those opposed, Article 15 passes by majority vote, as declared by the moderator. Article 16,
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move as written in the warrant that the town vote to accept Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5N, amend the general bylaws to include the new bylaw entitled Veterans Property Tax Work-Off Program, and approve Article 16 as printed in the May 14, 2018 Annual Town Meeting warrant. Mr. Murray, this is an article that is very similar to the senior tax work-off program that is in effect now. This will pertain to veterans in town. It's created with a maximum of $10,000. This is between the Board of Assessors and the Director of Veterans Services. They'll be managing this. And it will be similar, just like the seniors program. 10 veterans, they will have $1,000 opportunity to work off their taxes. And if the veteran can't do any of the scope of work or which is signed, they can have a proxy for them.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, or discussion on Article 16? Seeing no hands. All those in favor of Article 16, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Article 16 passes by unanimous vote, as declared by the moderator. Article 17.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move, as written in the warrant, that the town vote to accept the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 64 Ed, Section 3, authorizing the imposition of a local excise tax in the statutory amount of 3% on the sale or transfer of marijuana or marijuana products by a marijuana retailer operating within the town to anyone other than a marijuana establishment. Such excise to take effect January 1st, 2019, or such earlier time as may be authorized by law. Mr. Moderator, this is a retail-only tax. It does not apply to medical marijuana. It is very similar as we have our meals and hotel tax. It will be, the report will be coming, our sales from the retail marijuana will be coming from the state as we get our, same as a meal tax program. So it's very similar. It's a 3% maximum local excise tax on marijuana, retail only.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, or discussion on Article 17? Take your time, no problem.
Sandy Otherhead, 14 Tipping Place. Just a question, this isn't saying whether we want retail sales in Norton or not, it's just saying if we do have the sales that we will get a 3% tax. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
She wants to know, I'm really town manager to tell. I think I know the answer, but I'll let somebody else who's more knowledgeable answer it. Does this mean that we accept the sale of retail marijuana, or does this just mean that if it is allowed, then we institute a 3% tax on it?
This just means if it is allowed, we'll be able to get a 3% tax on it.
Thank you. So I just would like to follow that up with something. It seems like the one thing we could all agree on Monday night was that we certainly need the revenue in the town, so I would urge a yes vote on this, just in case it is allowed in the town, we get the revenue for it.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion, comments on Article 17? Seeing none? All those in favor of Article 17, please indicate by raising your hands. All those opposed? Article 17 passes by unanimous vote, as declared by the moderator. Article 18.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move, as written in the warrant, that the town vote to revise the town personal bylaws as on file with the town clerk by adding the Parks and Recreation Coordinator position to the job classification plan and to the salary plan with a proposed range of $17 to $21, I assume that's an hour. This is a non-union position, and any position or employee within the town has to be classified and placed in the town records. So this is what this article will do.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, discussion on Article 18? Mr. Savas of the School Committee.
As the last 5 Palmer Drive, member of the school committee. The $17 to $21 range, how does that compare to what we're paying now? Is that what we're doing now?
Mr. Chairman. Or Mr. Town Manager. Whoever gets lucky.
Yes, that's the range we currently have right now.
Yes, ma'am.
South Worcester Street. Is this a position that also provides benefits, health insurance, et cetera?
Mr. Town Manager.
Health insurance benefits are determined by the hours worked. Nothing in the wage and salary plan has anything to do with benefits. That's strictly on the amount of hours that the position would be provided with.
So do we know how many hours this person gets?
Right now, as approved in the budget, this would be eligible for benefits.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion on Article 18? Seeing none. All those in favor of Article 18, please indicate by raising your hands. All those opposed? Article 18 passes by majority vote. As declared by the moderator. Article 19.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move, as written in the warrant, that the town vote to amend Section 18C of the Stormwater Bylaw to clarify the process for enforcement thereof by deleting the strike-through text and inserting the underlined text, all as printed in Article 19 of the May 14, 2018 Annual Town Meeting warrant.
Okay, and can somebody just explain to the meeting what the basic change does and what it is? Mr. Town Manager?
This allows for non-criminal disposition. If someone's in violation of the stormwater bylaw, first fine would be $100, second would be $200, and progressive up to $300.
Thank you. And the bylaw is as written in your warrant. That's correct, right? Are there any questions, comments, or any good stormwater discussion? I know you're all thinking about it. Okay, seeing no hands. All those in favor of Article 19, please indicate by raising your hands. All those opposed? Article 19 is passed unanimously. That's determined by the moderator. Article 20.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move, as written in the town warrant, that the town vote to amend the general and zoning bylaws by making non-substantive, substantive ministerial amendments for the purpose of recodifying the general and zoning bylaws to create a more uniform presentation, organized topical structure, reader-friendly, and convenient format for inserting future amendments, including renumbered outline format, insertion of headings and subheadings.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this article seeks to amend the zoning bylaw, which will require a two-thirds vote. And I believe this does require a report, Mr. Daniels, for the... Okay, so we believe, just in case, even if it doesn't, we're going to do it anyway, but I believe this requires a report of action for the planning board. So, Mr. Daniels from the planning board, could you tell us, has this been considered and what action did the planning board take on it?
Mr. Moderator, with your permission, I'd like to address both Article 20, 21, 22, and potentially Article 23 of the same report.
In terms of
the report on the required report of the planning board on zoning articles.
I don't mind the mixed discussion, but I'll probably just ask you for the bare bones of the information on each one so the clerk can record it, and we don't want any problems with recording that. But I don't have any problem with you talking about them.
Mr. Moderator? Could I just-
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fernandez, I just noticed that there's still some verbiage where it needs to be completed in the article. So-
Okay, then I'm going to ask that you just read the motion again so it's read into the record.
Mr. Moderator, I move, as written in the town warrant, that the town votes to amend the general bylaws and zoning bylaws by making non-substantive ministerial amendments for the purpose of recodifying the general and zoning bylaws to create a more uniform presentation, organized topical structure, reader-friendly and convenient format for inserting future amendments, including renumbered outline format, insertion of headings, subheadings, providing for consistency with Massachusetts general laws, and internally with regard to spelling and use of various words, and updating references to existing town offices and bodies, and further, that the town vote to amend the general bylaws by inserting a new bylaw entitled Headings and Numbering, Authority for Town Clerk, or signed Alfred Numeric, references and correct internal cross-references, all as printed in Article 20 of the May 14, 2018 annual town meeting warrant.
Thank you. Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A proper and complete public hearing notice was published in the Sun Chronicle on February 26th and March 5th, 2018, posted in the town of Norton Town Hall, and a proper and complete notice was sent to all parties required by law to receive such notice, and a public hearing was held within 65 days of the date of filing of the application. The public hearings for each warrant article were opened on March 13th and continued to April 3rd, 2018, where they were closed the same evening. In addition to those required actions, the department included posts to Facebook, Twitter, and the department website to provide information on the proposed zoning amendments. Zoning articles recommended to town meeting. At its meeting on Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018, after a public comment period, the planning board voted upon motion duly made and seconded 6-0 to recommend to the annual town meeting the full text of the following articles as they appear in the warrant. Warrant Article 20, General and Zoning Bylaws Codification. Warrant Article 21, Keeping of Rabbits and Poultry for Personal Use. Warrant Article 22, Citing of Marijuana Establishments. And Warrant Article 23, Extend the temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments only if warrant Article 22 fails. Summary of issues heard at the public hearing. The April 3rd planning hearing was sparsely attended. No substantive comments were made by the public in relation to proposed zoning articles. Full minutes for the April 3rd meeting are available through the planning board website or by contacting departmental offices.
Okay, thank you, and we'll let the record show that what Mr. Fernandez read off will apply to each warrant article, so the clerk will have that information so that we don't have to go over it again. That would be great. And before we get into the article itself, I know Mr. Fernandez, you had asked to perhaps make a brief appeal because Mr. Fernandez is very lonely on the planning board these days, and he would like to address the need and the possible addition of new members to the planning board. Mr. Fernandez, I'd like to give you a special dispensation to do that right now.
Thank you. We are legally comprised of 7 members. Unfortunately, at the last election, two offices went without candidates, and no one was written in. So we're in need of 2 additional members. It seems to me this is an ideal audience. You care enough about the community to show up at town meeting. Notwithstanding the chairman, we are nice people, and we typically meet twice a month, Tuesday nights. The only requirement is that you be open-minded, and as I've said to my children as they grew up, 90% of accomplishment is just showing up, and 90% of participating in the planning board is just showing up, listening to presentations. What we deal with is we have many subdivisions should they occur. As you I'm sure know, we're looking at a large industrial and commercial complex on Leonard Street. That will come to the planning board. So obviously there's some important business to conduct. If in fact someone, either in the audience or someone that you know or someone at home that may be watching is interested in participating in the planning board, just jot a quick note. It can be sent to the selectman's office, 60 East Main Street. If you have any questions, later on I'll be here. My home number is 508-285-7477. I'm not an Uber driver, but I can pick you up. We're extremely interested in company on Tuesday nights, so thank you very much.
Thank you. It's always better to fish in a stocked pond, Mr. Fernandez. All right, Mr. Fernandez, can you just tell us a little bit about what this article does and the reason for it, please?
Basically, this is taking the existing town bylaws and the zoning bylaws, renumbering them. A company was hired by the town to, in essence, edit for grammatical, punctuation, and spelling errors. There's no change to any of the intent of any of the existing bylaws. This is simply a matter of, as is referred to, codifying them, putting them in text that is uniform. It will also be digitized so people can search by word, but it's important to know that nothing has changed. The one additional thing that it does do, it allows the town clerk with the consent of the town manager to change numbering if a bylaw is changed at a future point that may make reference to another bylaw and the numbers aren't quite right. The town clerk, without coming back to town meetings, can just change those numbers. Can't change the intent, can't change the content, but can make editorial changes. So this is more an editorial exercise as opposed to, certainly it's not a substantive change.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion on Article 20? And I remind you again, this requires a 2/3 vote for passage. Seeing no hands, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of Article 20, please indicate by raising your hands. All those opposed? Article 20 passes by unanimous vote, as declared by the moderator. Article 21.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move as written in the warrant that the town vote to amend the Norton zoning bylaw, Article 4, specifically the use table under Section 4.3, open space, agriculture, and recreational uses, by inserting the bold, italic, underlined text, and by deleting the strike-through text, all as printed in Article 21 of the May 15th, 2018 annual town meeting warrant. Mr. Moderator, since I'm a dog person, I think this pertains to rabbits and hens. I'm going to let the planning board or the town manager.
Okay, let the record show that Mr. Fernandez has already given the information about the planning board action, the 6-0 vote, and the dates of the hearing, so that applies to this, and that constitutes the report of the planning board. Mr. Fernandez, would you like to explain the purpose of the article?
Sure. Under existing zoning bylaw, if you run a chicken or a rabbit and you don't have 5 acres, you have to apply for a special permit. That, first of all, is a $100 application fee for the special permit. Requires a legal ad in the Sun Chronicle, requires a hearing in the planning board, again, for a couple of chickens or a couple of rabbits. We've had a few of these. It's frankly more cumbersome for the homeowner that wants to just have, as I said, a couple of chickens or rabbits. So this would allow it by right for 12 and under, no roosters, provided that you conform to all other zoning requirements.
Okay, is there any discussion? Well, I will tell you, we have an objection from the chickens. Yes, Ms. Harris.
Joanne Harris, 13 Stanley Road. As a former chair of the planning board, I wholeheartedly recommend this. I've sat through a number of chicken hearings, and it's been... and I'm currently on the planning board, and the rest of us want to keep chickens. I think it's in everyone's best interest to support them.
Thank you. Is there any further questions, comments, or discussion? Seeing none. And this also requires a 2/3 majority vote for passage. All those in favor of Article 21. Thank you, Peter. Please raise your hands. All those opposed? Article 21 passes by a 2/3 majority vote as declared by the moderator. To Article 22.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Chairman.
I move as written in the warrant that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws to authorize in the industrial district the siting of marijuana establishments, but specifically excluding on-site consumption. marijuana retail establishments, subject to a special permit requirement and site plan approval, all as printed in Article 22 of the May 14, 2018 annual town meeting warrant.
Okay, and again, let the record show that Mr. Fernandez has read the report of the planning board reporting the action, and also 6-0, Mr. Fernandez, a 6-0 vote in favor, and the dates of the hearings were read into the record and applied. Mr. Fernandez, would you like to address this article?
The question was raised earlier under the 3% sales excise tax for marijuana. Was that allowing the sale of or the commercialization of marijuana? That question from Norton was answered in last year's state election, where 54% of the town voted in favor of legalizing commercialization of marijuana retail sales and otherwise. The problem that poses from a zoning perspective, unless you identify a zone where these businesses can set up, in other words, if you kind of stick your head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist, it can be placed virtually anywhere where commercial activity takes place. We didn't think, at least at the outset, that that was a prudent approach. So what we are proposing by this bylaw, the zoning bylaw, is to allow it only in the industrial areas, which is akin to what Norton does for adult entertainment, tattoo parlors. If we're going to have it, it would only be in an industrial area. I know it's a little hard to tell, but the industrial areas are the orange areas on the zoning map. So beyond that, that's basically what we're trying to do. We're not necessarily condoning or supporting. That was done by Bridget and vote Corbin. We're just limiting it to those specific areas. Within the law itself, there are limits in terms of closeness to schools and churches. I believe it's 500 feet. But basically what we're doing by this bylaw, proposing by this bylaw, is limiting it to the industrial areas.
Are there any questions, comments, or discussion on Article 22? Yes, sir.
Tim Long from Village Way. You may have already answered this question, so apologies if you have. If this article is defeated, where will marijuana sales be allowed?
If it's defeated, anywhere that allows commercial activity, village commercial with the reds, the oranges, don't again without this village commercial yellow.
Village commercial.
And what is it? Okay, so it would be allowed in the yellows, the reds, and the oranges.
Just a second question. Does the state have any pre-existing or overreaching regulations about where the sales are allowed or any other limitations?
Other than distances from schools and churches, there are no restrictions at the state level. There's all types of processes that need to take place in terms of host community agreements with the Board of Selectmen, but in terms of location, the state doesn't involve itself. It would just have to be, again, in a commercially viable area, akin to what were common farms or CVS or a drugstore, etc.
Okay. Would the town have the ability to limit the number of establishments?
It's not through the town. I believe other than the host community agreement, the town is limited to saying where it could be sited. The selectmen would negotiate a host community agreement. I don't know if there are limits, you know.
Tabitha Harkin, the planning director. The state has the Cannabis Control Commission, which is the state advisory board on issuing these types of licenses, and then they would have the ability to negotiate a community host agreement when they come in, and we can decide how many of those and what the terms are at that point.
Yeah. Thank you.
Gentleman over here.
Greg Vincent, 23 Reservoir Street. could we get a little clarification? I mean, could somebody actually go up to the map and point out the industrial areas? A little show and tell.
Could I buy a vowel, please? Yes.
Okay, I have a hard time deciphering this map myself, which is why I think we said at town meeting on Monday that we're going to get a digitized zoning map, and that's an
And that's the famous Crayola map.
This is right. So 123 is this line that runs east to west this way. And then the 495 is this double line here, if you can tell, it's a bit mapped at this level. This is Commerce Way down here. If you're familiar with that area, this is the recently rezoned Leonard Street area. Up there is where you have like Norton Self-Storage towards Easton. I believe the old Cisco building is in this area, and I apologize, I'm not from Norton, so I'm looking to all of you to double check. South Worcester Street.
South Worcester Street and North Worcester Street.
And then I believe John Scott Boulevard is this area. Peter would probably do a better job than I do. Are there any other questions?
Is there any on 140? Is there any on 140?
140 is Mansfield Avenue, is this north south here, so no, there's no industrial on 140.
Question was, what is the yellow in the upper right?
The yellow, this area is actually where 274 East Main, where that housing development is around there. And there's commercial in Burning Fills, that area is yellow. That's commercial. And then up there is Great Woods.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see now, back over here. Okay.
Amy Sawyer, 7 Ellis Road. I guess from being here for the vote on the article regarding the taxation of marijuana, it seemed the room was relatively in favor of the revenue benefits to the town and making wise fiscal decisions. And it seems to me that the way to really maximize the financial benefit to the town could be allowing commercial and industrial development for marijuana establishments. So I guess maybe we should consider that as a better fiscal choice.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Ben Damore, 286 Taunton Ave. Basically, similar comments to the last speaker. How does it compare to other communities around us? Are other communities also allowing it in commercial zones as well as industrial zones?
Mr. Stanley, or town planner.
I can only speak to what I've heard most recently, that Mansfield and Easton are looking to ban it, but I know it's on ballot initiative, and I don't think it's been decided at this point.
I know a lot of the communities around us are choosing not to allow sales at all, so this could be a good opportunity to have those sales in Norton versus other places, and having them at least considering commercial zones. Also, again, knowing that it still has to be agreed to by the town with the agreements, that it might be a good thing to consider as well.
Thank you. Mr. Heaney.
David Heaney, 25 Fletcher Way. Mr. Moderator, I'd like to move to amend the article.
No, Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Heaney has an amendment to Article 22, which you will read, and then we will consider, assuming it has a second.
So I move to amend Article 22 by changing N to SP under column C in row 1. So the intention of this is what the last two speakers just mentioned, to allow the sale in commercial areas in addition to industrial zones.
Okay, can I just see that again? Yeah, please. Okay, so the amendment, the motion to amend the article is to change the no under commercial to an SP, which indicates that it could be granted in commercial with a special permit from the planning board. Is that the intent? Okay, first of all, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, there is a second. All right, we will now discuss the amendment, and all discussion until we dispose of the amendment favorably or unfavorably will be limited to merely the amendment. Mr. Heaney.
So I'd just like to share a couple of things with everybody. So,
Could you please kind of speak right into that?
Yeah, sure, sorry. So I recognize that there's a lot of different opinions about the use of this substance, but as the chairman mentioned, a little north of 54% of town voters a couple of years ago voted to allow the sale as part of the state referendum. And this isn't about suddenly allowing the use of this in town. I think we can all fairly assume that people who want to obtain this and use this can and do today. This is about taking the sales that would happen in a variety of locations in a variety of ways and having that be both regulated and taxed appropriately, as we were discussing earlier. For those of you that were here on Monday, you know that revenue is something that we certainly could use. And when we're talking about these establishments, we're not talking about someplace where people are going to sit there and smoke, right? That's still, even with this amendment, still expressly prohibited by the article. What we're talking about is essentially the equivalent of a liquor store, right? I sometimes on a Friday I stop at home, or I stop on the way home from work. I pick up some Sam Summer and I go home and I have a couple of beers at home. This is effectively the same kind of thing. As everybody can see from the zoning map, the industrial zones are probably not particularly attractive places to put a business. There's been a lot of chatter on Facebook. I am one of the people on Facebook, Mr. Selectman, and a lot of people have said, if we're going to do this, why don't we put it next to Great Woods? As we just discussed, next to Great Woods. Seems like a reasonable location, and that is a commercial zone, as we can see on the map up above. With regards to other areas, Mansfield actually had this on their town meeting last night. They voted to approve retail sales of both Mansfield Crossing and the Home Depot Plaza. So this is something that there's going to be the ability to buy at retail very close to our residents. If that's going to be the case anyway, why don't we do it in our town and get the revenue instead of having something in the other town and letting them get the revenue and us still having the use. By it being zoned special permit, my understanding, and somebody in the zoning area, please correct me if I'm wrong, any retail shops that want to open would require approval of both the planning board and the board of selectmen. Yeah. So it's not like we're just opening this up. There still are controls there. And so if there are going to be controls there anyway, why would we just make a blanket no now? Right? Why don't we allow that decision and that conversation to happen? And then just the last thing I want to share is, so I think there's an image that this is a bad thing, that people that are going to be in these stores are bad people. I have family in Colorado. For those of you that know, Colorado allows this statewide. And this Girl Scouts make a killing selling cookies outside of the stores. Right? It's not malicious. It's not literally. If you go Google Girl Scouts Colorado dispensary, you will see dozens, if not hundreds, of pictures of little kids standing outside these stores selling cookies. These are small businesses, and we could use the revenue, and I think it makes more sense to have it both in commercial and industrial zone. So, thank you.
Lauren Bukowski, 98 Village Way. Just thinking about the spirit of this, industrial zones are for industry, for manufacturing, for big. They're zoned separately for a reason. Commercial is for commercial businesses, sales and so forth. the spirit of what the zoning is. This is not an industrial factory. They're going to be small shops. And even though somebody might not like what they're selling in those shops, it's against the spirit of our zoning to pick and choose based on what they're selling rather than what's actually happening there. So I'm in support of this.
Okay, Cynthia. Sorry, but I have to go home tonight, so I'm going to recognize my wife first.
Cynthia Gouveia, 111 Maple Street. I'd just like to ask, this is specific to the amendment. I'd just like to ask why Village Commercial wasn't included in that, because looking at the map, it looks like that red line is Village Commercial, unless I'm wrong. So I'm just asking the maker of the motion, was there a reason? Oh, you're right there.
So, no specific reason for not including Village Commercial. Really, my goal was to try to establish this in a manner that will be able to encourage the businesses to be successful, to help drive the revenue to the town, while still having some amount of control over where it was, and especially with the Great Woods option really seemed like the best way to combine those two goals.
I guess I would just like to ask if we could include that, because it still requires a special permit. So, you know, it's still going to have to go through many stages before we ever get to a yes.
Well, the answer is we could if we had a written amendment to do that, but we don't have that yet, so we won't do that. Mr. Candies. Mr. Candies.
This discussion was had at the planning board, and I'd like to make 3 points. First, there's a legal question. Ordinarily, if there's a zoning amendment on a town meeting warrant to rezone part of Freeman Street, and that area is identified, you can't expand that zone because it does not give fair warning to that parcel that heretofore was not going to be rezoned, and then someone stands up and amends it to expand a particular zone. This is somewhat akin to that philosophy. There may be people at home who thought, well, you know what, they're going to rezone it to industrial, I'm nowhere near industrial, I don't really care. But if they were going to rezone it to a village commercial or rezone it to a commercial, I do care. So the argument can be made, and I've asked council, and it's still being considered, whether in fact that's fair warning to those people in village commercials or commercial, whatever amendments are going to be forthcoming. But in any case, we had this discussion at the planning board. Heard many of these same comments amongst ourselves, and I think what we wanted to do is, this is new territory. I went to college, so I'm not totally unfamiliar with recreational marijuana, but that was a long time ago.
All the more reason to come to the planning board meetings.
If that's what it takes. In any case, the thinking was, we have to start somewhere, as I started this whole conversation with, and if that works out, perhaps we expand. Just a little word of caution on the safety net, if you will, of special permits. Although you do have to get a special permit both under our original proposal and the amended proposal, you need to be a little careful about special permits. You can't just arbitrarily say yes to one and no to another. Can't be what's typically referred to as arbitrary and capricious. If someone in a village commercial, if that's what we're going to do, meets the same criteria as someone in an industrial or commercial, they've got grounds for appeal if they're denied simply because you didn't want them. So you need to be a little careful about placing great confidence in the whole special permit process. Long and short of it is, we took the approach, let's try this initially, from an industrial standpoint, as a, if you will, trial balloon. There's nothing that prohibits this from being expanded at some later point, but I think we want to walk before we run.
Okay, before I recognize I'll recognize the gentleman here and then Mr. Soldat over there. Before I do, the question has come up as to whether or not the amendment fits within the scope of the article. And I've talked briefly to council about it, and there is a legitimate concern, as Mr. Fernandez raised, as to whether or not the voters have had sufficient warning, whether, because it was to do it in an industrial zone, and now the amendment is to also add other districts, and that does raise a legitimate point of whether or not there's enough notice to the voters, whether the voters had a reasonable expectation to expect that this could happen, and whether or not it should be allowed. This is a question that Council has advised me of, Mr. James has advised me of the concern, and it falls to the moderator to make the decision whether the amendment is within the scope of the article. Having devoted much thought to it now, I believe that the people knew that they were talking about possibly citing, whether they were talking about citing marijuana plants, recreational use marijuana plants, into industrial zones. I do not see, in my non-legal opinion, I do not see where the motion to allow it to also go into commercial zones is that far removed from the original intent of the motion. And therefore, I'm going to rule that the amendment is within the four corners of the motion and will be allowed. Yes. Okay. All right. Then we'll go to Mr. Soldat.
Soldat, 42 Woodward Street. I'm not really in favor of allowing it even in industrial, but as long as that was the original intent of the article, I could do without the additional revenue the town will eventually or potentially get from moving into commercial zones. So that's my story.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
John Thurlow, 89 Burt. I'd like to speak in support of the amendment. If you take a look at the map, the industrial cited in the orange there, nothing is convenient to draw people in. The access up by Great Woods and 495, especially in light of the Mansfield vote, to keep us in competition. I would also like to just put in a word against using the village commercial zoning, because that stretch along 123 sites our high school, our middle school, one of the elementary schools, and I would like to keep it away from our kids.
Gordon Seal, 28 Tide Road, Newark. I live in Redwood Village. That's located in the commercial zone that's shown yellow by 123. As you're aware, the Leather Street parcel, as proposed now, has contemplated a retail section rather than 123, which would very readily accommodate the marijuana sales. By expanding the yellow, which includes 274 East Main Street and Redwood Village, you're including about 400 residential units, which doesn't have a traffic light. The corner of Leonard Street in that retail section is scheduled to have a traffic light. So I'm opposed to that motion, especially as it relates to that section. If you're looking to do another area of the town, that might be something else. But one of the issues that came out of the industrial park would be traffic. And at least you're going to have traffic lights in that intersection. There'll be probably one convenient right off of 495 for people to get to that location as a retail section. But there are spots of retail that would be available in that commercial area without the benefit of the right to protect the residents. So I would oppose that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Police Chief Clark. Over 7 o'clock? Okay.
Good evening. Just a couple things I wanted to mention. So we had some discussions with the roundtable group regarding this article, and I would be in favor of the industrial end of it. My concern is the kids in the village commercial, in the areas that the kids walk and are kind of associated with. Certainly, I want to make sure that they're not near the schools. The industrial sections really aren't. There is, from the police department view, we have a lot of concerns. I know Colorado was mentioned earlier. There are a lot of issues in Colorado. We're already seeing out here in Massachusetts the increase of driving while under the influence of marijuana. Certainly, it's an all-cash business, which has its own issues with it. They can't go into a bank, so it's an all-cash business, so thefts and robberies could occur more. Certainly, we don't want to encumber upon that, and I think we're going to be a lot busier with this, and there's going to be very little that we're going to be able to do. So I'd like to limit where we can put it. They have to be at least 500 feet away from the school. There's not much more that the Cannabis Control Commission has allowed us to change on that end. Just checking my notes from earlier. Certainly delivery options. If one of the retailers are a delivery service, that's an issue. I do agree with the way the article is made regarding no open consumption. I think that'll just be a nightmare if we did that. Certainly, I mentioned OUIs, edibles, people getting into a car after having edibles and things like that. Certainly are areas of concern. Loitering, public use outside. If you don't think it's going to happen, it's definitely going to happen. You can't stand in the middle of the road somewhere without smelling it more now since it's passed. So we'll get more odor complaints and possibly destruction of property. Those are just my concerns that I would have. I know everybody's looking at the 3% sales tax and looking at it as a big win, especially after Monday night's meeting. I'm not, my own opinion, I'm not convinced that this is going to be a cash windfall for one, especially when the Cannabis Control Commission is looking at, getting $10 million just to operate, and looking at what the state has done. They're not very good, and you can just ask the school committee giving that money back. So, just something that I wanted to mention, just on the record, that the town manager didn't put me on a gag order. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to reinforce what Chief Clark just said, I wanted to point out a couple of well-written articles in the Globe. These businesses are by design forced to be all-cash businesses. The feds don't recognize them as anybody who can have a bank account or do any real banking. So we can all imagine if all these funds that they're receiving to give us our 3% are stored in-house, with I'll just call our society today, these places are susceptible to robbery, and if you keep them in the industrial zones, they might be a little more secure, they might be a different style of building, it might be away from the general commerce area. I think now we should just go with what the planning board said and kind of walk before we turn.
So I'm going to go to the gentleman behind you, just because you've spoken on this once, so I want to go to people who haven't spoken yet, but I'll come back to you, sir.
Kevin Schleicher from West Hodge Street. The only thing I would say is cautious. Listen to what Mr. Fernandez is saying. Putting this right now in the industrial zone allows us, a certain area in town. By this amendment, open it up to say a commercial. You say, it's not going to be in their schools. Well, your kids are still going to be in these areas. I mean, there's karate, there's restaurants, there's places on that area that you're still going to have access for these kids walking in and out of these areas. By putting in these industrial areas, like you said, you can limit it to what you're at now. Down the road, if something changes and one of these places work out and someone's looking to come back to it and move it to something like a commercial, or even a village commercial if it's something that we can do. But just by saying, well, we're going to do a special permit, But it doesn't automatically just say, oh, well, we're gonna go, we don't like it here, we don't like it there. If they meet those requirements, we can't really do anything about it at that point. So I would just caution you that putting it in commercial doesn't just automatically say, no access to kids, no access to things, we won't see it. We are gonna see it. We'll see it when we go to restaurants, we'll see it when we go to the place that we drop my kids off, in and out of convenience stores. These are all these places that are in this zoning. And I know it's confusing up there to see, but, if you look closely, just by saying, oh, we're sticking on the Mansfield line and making Mansfield a problem, it's not going to be Mansfield's problem, it's going to be ours, and we're going to have to deal with it. So I would caution you by opening this up to a, exaggerated thing right now and keep it to industrial and see how we do with that.
First of all, I'd like to vouch that Mr. Fernandez is a nice guy, just so you know. The couple of concerns I have. First of all, the Board of Selectmen are waiting for conditions, we're waiting for direction from the state as to how we're going to monitor, how we're going to take care of these. Pretty much the same way we do with liquor licenses. And unfortunately, we don't know what they're doing yet. So, personally, I agree with just the industrial at this point, only because we want to put it somewhere. We're not saying we don't want to do a total ban. We get it. We want to allow it to be in the town of Norton. But we don't know the regulations yet. We don't know how many we're going to be allowed. There's a lot of questions that are unanswered at this point. The industrial was kind of like a baby step in getting it in there and getting it protected. And yes, we will allow it in the town of Norton, regardless of what our neighbors do. One concern I have is, if this article goes to the Attorney General, and this is maybe something the town council can answer from it, the reason we're putting this in place is to protect it. In other words, we're designating a certain area in Norton that will allow this type of activity or business. Once we approve this here as a government body, it goes to the Attorney General. The Attorney General certifies and approves the article. What happens if it fails? What happens if the attorney says it is not within the scope of the article? We have to be concerned about that. What I would ask you to consider doing is put this through the way it is by the recommendation of the planning board. Come back in October. If you want to expand it to commercial or village commercial, whatever you want to do, I'm totally opposed to that. What I don't want to see happen is that the article goes to the Attorney General, and suddenly the first of the year we're saying, oh, we can put these anywhere. We can put them in your backyard, we can put them commercial, village commercial, we can put them anywhere you want to in town. The purpose of this article, my purpose was to lock in a particular zone in town. And I would encourage you to stick with the original, if we can at this point. I'd also encourage you to come back in October if you want to expand it. I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem, and I'm concerned that maybe council can give us some guidance on how to handle this, because what I don't want to see is us approve it and then it get denied by the state.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. Janelle.
Can you just tilt that down here a little bit?
Sorry, I'm very
No problem.
my height. The Attorney General's office has to review every general and zoning bylaw that's approved at town meeting. As part of that process, they ensure, the Attorney General's office municipal law unit ensures that the voters had adequate notice as to what was being contemplated at town meeting. I know there's been an issue of scope tonight. Certainly that would be one thing that the Attorney General's office would review when it looks at this bylaw, to ensure that voters had adequate notice of what was being contemplated at town meeting.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, as I pointed out when I said that, understand that it is a legitimate concern. It's a question that is not yet decided. It's my opinion as moderator that this motion fits within the scope of the article. It would not be the first time that someone in the state disagreed with me on something that I felt. That's a chance that you take, and you have to weigh that in your minds and give it whatever proper weight that you feel that that's a chance, because it's possible that it could be rejected as out of the scope. It's also possible it could be approved. I make no guarantees. My feeling as moderator is if I'm going to make an error, I'm going to make the error in giving my town meeting a choice as opposed to denying them a choice. So that's partially what influences me in this. And then plus that I honestly believe that it is within the scope, but again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't pay me for legal advice, you could be making a big mistake. Gentlemen.
Edward Martin, 215 North Washington Street. Just a question of clarification. The amendment as it's being voted on right now does not include village commercial, correct?
That is correct.
All right, just take a position.
Mr. Sweeney.
Mark Sweeney, 14 Laurel Lane. So, Mr. Moderator, does that mean you're basically not taking the advice of town council? Is that true?
No. Town council is warning of the possibility. Town council doesn't make rulings. The town council gives advice. Town council made the case to me, and I respect very much the opinion of town council. And town council told me about the risks and the possibility, and it's my job as moderator to make the decision based on that. It is my determination that the article is within what's commonly called the four corners of that the amendment is in the four corners of the article, meets the scope, and does not differentiate enough that the citizens wouldn't be warned. They knew they were going to cite a marijuana facility or be asked to cite marijuana facilities in town. They knew it was industrial. I don't think that moving commercial is that big a jump, and so therefore that's why we're ruling. But town council is quite right in pointing out the possibility that it could be, it could be overturned. I'm just making my best decision as moderator. The rest is up to people, apparently, with degrees.
All right. So basically, probably everyone here is going to say that we're doing it to increase the revenue stream, which is going to be limited anyway. It's going to be all cash, as Keith said, so there's going to be no real controls. We're going to get anything out of it. And the gentleman over here said, we got to keep away from kids, because he was saying, we're talking about not having to go into the village or something close to the schools. But if you're going to almost allow it, you have to allow it because the state voted for it, so the planning board is going to try to put it to the side. I think the best thing to do is keep it away from the kids, put it off to the side as best possible. I voted no for it, I voted no again. I just don't want it in the town at all. If we have to bring it in, let's put it down with the tattoos and the adults way off in the corner. So I'm not in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew Bramwell, 35 Dean Street. I support this amendment to allow into commercial zoning. The way I see it is if we currently put the dispensaries only in the industrial zones, especially with the news that Mansfield is now allowing into Mansfield Crossing, we're going to lose much of our sales from out of town, people living out of town. If we allow it near Great Woods, just think of the concerts, the sporting events there. It's going to get a huge amount of revenue compared to what they would in industrial. In industrial, we're probably only going to have in-town sales. We're not going to be anywhere near 495, no off-highway sales or anything. And even the businesses near their commercial area, I heard that you don't want the kids exposed to it. If I remember correctly, there's alcohol stores in the commercial area, and it's practically the same thing.
The gentleman in the mic, now go to Mr. Savas.
The previous speaker pretty much spoke what I was going to say. But if we don't allow it in the commercial areas, we see it as an option. He's right. We're going to go into a crossing. We're going to go to the Home Depot Center and purchase it there. And it still will be brought back into this town. In the way you cut it, it will be in this town. And there's a brewery directly across the street from the Gap. There's alcohol right across the street from our schools. There's tobacco sales right across the street from our schools. We, as parents, as a community, need to show them what is correct usage of products that are meant for adults over the age of 21. And hopefully that's what we can do as a community, we can do as parents, to advise to help our kids and show them the correct way to use these products.
just wanted to speak to the scope of the amendment and whether or not there's fair warning. The article itself is voting to only allow it in industrial. So if it gets defeated, it would get allowed in village commercial, and industrial. So the people who were in those must have known that that was a possibility. So if the original article fails, then it would go in those, it's going to be allowed there. So they can't argue that they wouldn't have fair warning.
Thank you.
So just if I may, I just want to address 2 points that have been brought up, and I appreciate all the great debate on it. But the first point on the crawl, then walk, then run, I start in industrial and sort of see where it goes. How many retail types of establishments have been successful in an industrial organization, right? To me, starting an industrial means starting assuming it's going to fail, because there's not commercial viability in those areas. And the second point on the all-cash business, that's a true story, right? These businesses are still a little bit on the fringe. Generally speaking, they have trouble getting bank accounts and accepting credit cards and things like that. But I'm pretty sure all transactions with marijuana products today in Norton are all cash. This isn't about changing what comes into the town. This is changing how we have control over how it's dispensed and how it's acquired, right? And I think that's an important point, that people who use these substances, in a great preponderance of cases, they use them respectfully and responsibly. This is just about having us have a little bit more control over how it's done, and I'd argue that if we limit it to a place where it can't be successful, all that means is it's going to remain completely uncontrolled, or the purchases are going to be done out of town, and again, we lose out on the revenue if we do it that way. Thank you.
Walter Engel, 137 Pine Street. I'd like to thank a lot of the previous speakers for capturing my points that I was going to mention today. But as somebody else mentioned, this is happening in Colorado. I've got relatives in Colorado. I've visited Colorado, and it has not caused the downfall of any societies there. I feel that someday we're going to look back on this and we're going to say, what's the big deal? This is not going to cause the downfall of Norton. And we need to seize the opportunity to get the tax revenue, to have control over how this process is implemented. And I think the amendment makes a good step in moving us in that direction. So I encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Let's see, I'm just trying to give both, so yes, sir.
Hi, Tim Long. I voted no against this when it came up to referendum in Massachusetts. I'm completely against my kids coming anywhere near this, and I'm the most uncool dad in the whole town. I think it's here. Marijuana is in our community. It's going to be where the kids are going with the Mansfield Crossing. As much as I don't want it around my kids, it just is. And I think the difference between having it industrial versus also commercial is going to have a very small difference whether our kids are around it. So I hate it, but I don't think it's going to make a real difference. Thanks.
Hi. California recently did legalize it, in fact, after Massachusetts. And they already have retail establishments everywhere, and they are bringing in millions of dollars in tax revenue. Now, this whole thing between industrial and commercial, I have one fear, and that the attorney brought up, and that is what the Attorney General Smith said. Whether the residences for the commercial properties have been forewarned enough. And then the whole thing was shut down. Sad that we only included industrial to begin with. We probably should have included commercial or but from the onset. And then we wouldn't have this situation. I truly just lose all kinds of revenue to Mansfield because Mansfield Crossing and Home Depot Plaza, crossing the liquor store next to, that used to be next to Staples, turns into the community. And as far as, these establishments, it's like a liquor store. You have to be 21 years old. Kids are going into liquor stores and buying liquor. What kids are going to go into these stores to be able to buy.
Thank you.
as a point of information, and I don't know it, so I'm just going to ask, because it's been said we could come back in the fall and do this again. If this article were passed and we wanted to make a change, can I ask either Mr. Fernandez or Town Council, would the whole process have to start again in order to change this? Let's say it passed here for just industrial. Would someone have to go through file? Would there have to be new public hearings? Would there have to be all that? Or would it be a shorter process? I don't know the answer, so I want to make sure that people understand what they would be facing if they did that.
To get something on the October annual town meeting, it just needs 10 signatures of registered voters. And then once that new proposed zoning article has those 10 signatures, it has to go on the warrant as petitioned. We, as the planning board, would have a hearing, no big deal, and it would come back to town meeting, and at that point, you'd deal with the commercial piece. And to be candid, as I said, we've had many of these same conversations amongst ourselves. We thought we would take a limited initial approach. It's pretty simple, as I just said, to expand that. Mr. Kimball raised the issue of if in fact there's a question as to whether it was sufficient warning such that this thing gets thrown out by the AG's office. That's a little more scary to me. So I think that I know I'm speaking to my own point, but the more prudent approach is to, again, start with the industrial, and we can, as soon as October, expand it and do that without any question as to legitimacy and legality. And that's the approach I would propose that you vote for.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Renee Daly, 69 South Washington Street. First, I want to say thank you, Mr. Moderator, for letting us discuss this. I think it's been a good conversation. While I understand the points of kind of limiting this, I think it really is the wrong approach. I think we should go to commercial for a couple reasons, and I'm going to go in the Wayback Machine for a second. When I was pursuing my undergrad a couple decades ago, one of my research papers was on the legalization of marijuana. There are a lot of good points for that. When I think about us talking about just revenue in general, yes, we'll get revenue from the stores, but if we actually bring people into the town, and think about when you go out shopping or whatever, right? You go to get, I'll use alcohol. You go to get alcohol and you talk about, hey, we're going to go to dinner. So if you put something in an industrial area and you're going just for that one thing, we have no other opportunities to generate revenue. If you're sitting up by Great Woods and you go into the store, you buy some pot, and you decide, hey, I want to go to Alberto's to eat, right? Like you're going to give other businesses the opportunities too. You're going to bring people into the town, and I'm not saying we're going to Alberto's because we just consumed the pot and now we're going to munchies by any means, but it gives the opportunity to bring more people into the town to see what are some of the other retailers in the area, what are some of the other things that we have to offer. So it's not just specific to a marijuana shop. The other thing too, in respect to the kids, I think everybody's priority is the kids, and I appreciated the comments about it's our responsibility as parents and our responsibilities as people in the community to make sure that it's being used appropriately. But the other thing too is if anybody thinks that kids don't have access to marijuana, you are sorely mistaken. They have better access than we do, and I know people who grow it. So, it is here. It's here. It's an opportunity for us to control it. I appreciated the comments. Police chief, I believe I appreciated those comments as well, and I'll kind of be devil's advocate that if we have loitering and we have these other issues going on, think of it as another opportunity to generate revenue and arrests and fines. And I'm not saying it to be sarcastic, but I do expect if this happens that we will have to police this more, and that's a responsibility on our local law enforcement. But it's something that's here, it's something that we really need to consider, and I think that there are benefits that outweigh any of the negatives or, kind of thinking about how do we approach this in a more conservative fashion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dinah O'Brien, 6 Xavier Road. I'd like to move the question.
Because we have 5 people standing, I'm going to exercise my discretion as moderator and not accept your motion right now. I may accept it in a few minutes, but right now, because there are 5 people standing, and this is an important decision for the community, I want to make sure that we're fully discussed and that people who feel it's important to speak to it have the opportunity. So with respect, I'm going to deny your motion so that we can just continue until, and maybe get this fleshed out just a bit more. But thank you. Ms. Harris.
I just want to say that I see the potential of commercial zone, but I have no concern, as Mr. Hernandez says, with having the due notice. And just put this in perspective, we're talking less than 6 months. I don't think we have a lineup of establishments looking at the town yet. So it gives us time to think about it, make sure we get a strong foundation in, and some of the interest in the zone. So say people think for planning board areas, then this would be prepared in advance of town meeting, close to the next session.
Thank you. Mr. Wiggins.
Yes, Peter Wiggins, 157 Mansfield Ave, trailer 43. And I agree with what Ross says, even though it's commercial, but I am concerned about the kids in the schools. If this marijuana shops are put at the commercial zones, and I think that we should limit these pot shops to industrial zones. Thank you.
Hi, Sue Lieber, 16 Seminary Way. I'm for it going to commercial, but I do have a couple of questions that will brought up. If this is voted down completely tonight, are you saying it can open up to even village commercial going forward? I didn't understand that comment that somebody made. So basically, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'll tell you, let us answer your first question, then we'll move, unless there's more to that.
I actually just like with everything that was said, I'm confused as the Attorney General could vote this down if you vote commercial in tonight.
No, I think the concern about the Attorney General is a concern of scope. Articles have to be within the scope as they were originally advertised so that people aren't misled. In other words, if you put an article on the warrant to build a town swimming pool on a piece of property, and then someone makes a motion instead to erect a marijuana establishment, then that is unreasonable because the voters have not had any warning that a marijuana facility was going to be built. They thought it was a swimming pool. That's the same idea here. Is that an argument can be made that it was advertised as an industrial zone, and that people thought it was only going to be an industrial zone, and that commercial people did not have enough notice. My ruling is that this was in the scope, but that should have been anticipated, but I could be wrong. I'm just telling you I'm making my best ruling based on what I know, and the Attorney General could possibly say, no, you know what, that was not in the scope, and it needs to go back and be voted on again. So the Attorney General could pass it. We don't know.
So if that were to happen, would it then come back on the warrant in October automatically?
I'll ask town council. I believe if it's denied, then I don't know if it gets remanded back or if it's just denied. I'm not sure how that process works. If the amendment passed and the article passed, and it was changed to commercial, and the Attorney General denied it on the basis of scope, then is the article considered defeated? Is it remanded back to the town for action, or what happens to it?
It would be disapproved, and then it would have to come back to town meeting for further review following a planning board process or a petitioned article.
So if it came back approved, then that would be fine, but they could deny it at that point as well? Is that what you're saying?
Through Mr. Moderator, yes, if there was an issue of scope, which generally is deferential to the moderator's determination, and it was disapproved, then it would start all over. If it was approved, then it would go into effect as passed by town meeting.
Okay, so there's a chance we could lose this altogether if we added the commercial in.
There is a chance that if you add the commercial, that the Attorney General could disapprove of it, and then you would have to go back and repeat the process in order to get this done. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Fernandez wants to answer your question.
There is one other consequence, however. We have a moratorium that expires June 30th. And that's why we wanted to take some action tonight and limit it, albeit there's been obviously discussion for other areas, but limit to industrial, so that we had something on the books. So if in fact this amendment passes and it's expanded to commercial as well, and the Attorney General says, no, that wasn't fair warning, I'm going to disapprove that action, that will likely be after June 30th. Our moratorium will have expired, and it can go anywhere where commercial activity takes place. That's the danger I was trying to point out.
So our best benefit would be to do industrial, vote commercial in October?
Well, here again, I realize I'm speaking to my own wishes here, but that is the safest bet, and as I said, it's other than 10 signatures, it's not a lot of heavy lifting, so that can be done.
So we could do the 10 signatures as we walk out the door tonight, and we would be all set?
Well, you'd need the language for those 10 signatures, and come to a planning board meeting, or give me a call, I'll write that language up. It's fairly simple, and the gentleman who made the amendment, you'd probably just take his amendment and sign that with 10 signatures. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. That's fairly easy to do, but the point being, again, this is self-serving, I understand, but I would urge you to vote for the industrial area, which the planning board is recommending. If you want to expand it, that can easily be done in October.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Amy Sawyer, 7 Ellis Road. Mr. Moderator, I have a question for Mr. Fernandez. How many people attended the public hearing on these warrant articles?
Less than 5.
So we're very concerned about notifying our friends and neighbors here in town about the potential of a dispensary moving in near their homes, but 5 people attended. Which I will tell you was 5 more than attended the public hearing on the budget at Finance Committee, so congratulations.
I think, and Mr. Fernandez would note, I think the concern is perhaps that people might not have possibly come because they knew it was an industrial area, and maybe there would have been 100 people there if they knew it was in a commercial area. Maybe not. But I think that's, and correct me, Mr. Fernandez, if I'm wrong, I think that's the concern of those who worry about that. Is that accurate?
Well, again, when I was not anticipating an amendment, shame on me, but it did occur to me that this raises the whole scope issue and a fair warning issue. I'm not an attorney either, but stranger decisions have been rendered by the Attorney General, and again, if you want to take the safe course, yet not exclude the possibility of expanding this to commercial. Again, it's self-serving. Vote for what the planning board is recommending, and we will help you write an article that allows for it to be expanded to commercial, and that can be handled at next town meeting, and there's no legal issue in terms of scope.
What's that? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Warren Siegel, just to follow up, and I'll do this quickly. Just so everybody realizes that section is, it's not that many deals that's commercial areas. I understand the great with is really being an attraction for everybody. But what you have to understand is that other yellow area that's right off of 123 is predominantly residential. And that's really not the intent of what you're trying to do. And that's what you're doing by this amendment. Right now, the industrial apartments and the others are far away from being developed. Right now, that's the only area of 123 that has Red Mill Crossing, which has retail spaces that will be available to move into that. Red Mill Village is a 55-year-old community. When they tried to put in liquor license in Kelly's, they had a lot of outcry from our community. It was passed. And I would suggest, with all respect to the moderator, that if this was known to my community, you would have a lot more residents here in our position. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the gentleman here, and then the lady there, and then hopefully we can move to wrapping this up. Yes, sir.
Mark White, 218 Plain Street. Just one quick note about the industrial areas. I know the Lane Street development is a couple years off, but I think that's probably one of the more attractive industrial options or something like that. here, but I believe the retail locations in that lot right on 123, not too far away from the daycare which is across the street, not thinking of off streets that go past that on 123. So there are concerns with that. And this is similar concern with commercial as with that particular industrial.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Sherry Pensinger, 4 Susan Circle. I just had a quick question. When is the earliest that a shop can come into our town? Is it June 1st? I see something about the June 30th, 2019, so I'm just confused as how soon can a shop actually come into town to start selling marijuana?
Mr. Fernandez?
And I'm not sure what the regulations allow, but currently we have on the books a June 30th moratorium, so nothing can be approved in Norton until June 30th. By the same token, it's a fairly lengthy process, as I understand it, in terms of getting a host community agreement negotiated with the Board of Selectmen. Then only then do they start the special permit process. So it's a somewhat lengthy process. I couldn't give you, a 60-day, 90-day, but I can tell you they can't start before June 30th in Norton.
But when you say June 30th, you're saying 2018?
That's June 30th, yes.
So what is the 2019 moratorium? What is that represent?
It's our moratorium expires this June 30th, 2018. I'm sorry, you're one step ahead of me.
Right.
The next article, 22, is it?
23.
23. If either the amended or the main motion fails and we have nothing, then the planning board, as a stopgap, is recommending extending the moratorium to June 30th of 2019. But that's only if this article, either amended or as removed, doesn't pass.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That was a very civil and a very informative debate, and I think we're now ready to move to the question. The article itself, ladies and gentlemen, is a zoning article that requires a 2/3 majority vote to pass. However, the amendment, which we are going to vote on, only requires a majority vote to pass. We will vote on the amendment. If the amendment is successful, then the amendment becomes the main motion. And then we would vote again on the main motion, and that would require a 2/3 vote. If the vote on the amendment is defeated by a majority vote, then the original motion would remain. We would vote on that, and that would require a 2/3 vote for passage. So does everybody understand that part of it? So what we are going to vote on right now is the amendment, which now would allow, by special permit, the building in commercial zones. It changes the N to an SP under commercial. Everybody understands what that does? Okay, great. We're voting on the amendment only. All those in favor of the amendment to allow in commercial as well as industrial, please indicate by raising your hands. All those opposed? Oh boy. Okay, I just want to do that one more time, if we could, please. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hands. All those opposed? The moderator is undecided, and therefore we will have a standing vote. We need our counters to come down. It's been a long time since I had to do a standing vote. This is kind of cool. I know you're all thrilled, but we moderators are fascinated by simple stuff. Hold on just a second. Our town clerk is getting our expert counters who have been waiting years to do this. Now, if you are in a non-voting section, which is up there, and you are in fact a registered voter, please move down, because if you stand, you will not be counted if you are in a non-registered voter area. So I just want to make sure everyone understands, you will not be counted if you are sitting in a non-voter seating area. Okay, Madam Clerk, are you all set? All right, ladies and gentlemen, All those, and I would ask for this purpose, please, if you're standing, please find a seat until the vote's over, otherwise you're going to confuse the heck out of us. All those in favor of the amendment, please stand and remain standing until I ask you to sit, please. Madam Clerk, just let me know when you're ready. Okay. All right, you don't have to, don't tell me the amount, just keep it until the end for yes or no. All right, all those, you may now sit, please. Thank you very much. Now, all those opposed to the amendment, please rise and remain standing until I ask you to sit, please. Are we done with counting, Madam Clerk, as far as counting? All right, could you all please sit? Just a second while the clerk brings us the result. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the result of the standing count on the amendment, yes, 84, no, 88. The amendment is defeated. We will now move to the main motion. The main motion is the original motion, which allows only in the industrial zone by special permit. This now requires a 2/3 majority vote in order to pass. All those in favor of Article 22 as originally moved, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Article 22 passes by a 2/3 majority vote as declared by the moderator. Article 23. Article 23. Article 23. Article 23 is declared lost for lack of a motion. Article 24.
Article 24. Article 24 is declared lost for lack of a motion. Article 25. Article 25. Article 25 is declared lost for lack of a motion. Article 26. Article 26. Article 26 is declared lost for lack of a motion. Pardon me? A motion has been made to adjourn the annual town meeting. It's been seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, I declare the annual town meeting to be adjourned. Thank you.